Microphone check 1 2. Just wanting to get this camera angle situated. Microphone check 1 2. Got the angle situated. Here we go. Thanks, sir. Okay. We're live. Instagram, live on YouTube. As we proceed, welcome back. As we proceed to give you what you need. Welcome back to another session of our son's studies. Here we go. Another session as we proceed. Microphone check 1 2 1 2. On YouTube, we're good on Instagram. YouTube is now giving me a notification that we're a little slow on network, but we know nothing's wrong with my Wi-Fi. Okay, we're just gonna proceed. I pray you are healthy, in good health, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and last but certainly not least, healthy financially. Phew. Last week, we ran into some difficulties where Instagram wasn't letting me go live. So we back live on Instagram. Now we bounce in on YouTube. YouTube is having some difficulties. So we're gonna uh, we're gonna we're gonna proceed live and complete. Just got word that we live in action. All right. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and open up in the name of Allah, who appeared in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, to whom we forever and ever give praise and thanks for raising a divine leader, teacher, guide, and example in the person of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. In these two great and holy names, I greet the brothers and the sisters in the universal understanding of peace. Wassalamu alaikum. Welcome to another session. I'm the host of the studies of these sessions of Sun Studies. My name is Brother Fatan Bey. I'll be a host. And I want to welcome you, being the best, the righteous, and the powerful, according to Allah in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. I bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship besides Allah in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. I bear witness that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is his messenger. And I further bear witness that the lessons that our Savior Allah gave us to study and learn is the fulfillment of the prophecies of all the former prophets. Today, not going to take up too much of your time. We're going to take our time. We're going to go into our subject matter today from the book An Invincible Truth. As you can see in our title, it's a verse from the Bible, Revelations 16:6. And the article today is titled The Blood Shedder. So we're going to go ahead and get into the article and recognize the relevance and importance it has on today. Now, need I not remind you that today is June the 29th, 2025, In this article, The Bloodshedder was written June the 29th, 1957. In the article, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad puts in parentheses Revelation 16:6. So, what we're going to do, keeping it in accordance with studies, we have here the Bible, and we're going to open it up to Revelation 16:6. And I know those of you who have been tuning in consistently, we just jumping straight into the articles. Not we're just gonna cut straight through the fluff. So in Revelation 16:6, it says, first off, giving recognition, praise, and glory to Master Farad Muhammad. And it says here, you brought these judgments, for they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. It is what they deserve. Let's keep that in mind. I'm going to read it again. Giving all recognition, glory, and praise to our God, Allah, in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, who is and who was. For you have brought these judgments. Allah has brought these judgments. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. It is what they deserve. I mean, we could end the thing right now and say all praise due to Allah. That's the law of cause and effect. I mean, I'm happy. You should be happy. We close the book on that. But we want to get into more understanding. You know, the Bible says, in all thy getting, get an understanding. So with that introduction that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has given us, the bloodshedder, Revelation 16:6, we really want to go into the article so we have a more clear understanding. Because Honorable Elijah Muhammad puts it plain and direct. It says, according to the word of Allah God and the history of the world since the grafting of the Caucasian race 6,000 years ago, they have caused more bloodshed than any people known to the black nation. Now, I want to read that again because this is something that can just be historically proven. This is regardless of theology, our belief in God. You can go into history. And one of the things, I've never heard a Caucasian, a white person, say this, but I've heard many native blacks and indigenous people perhaps have made mention that all groups of people have shed blood, which is a fact. But that's not what this is saying. This is they're saying according to the word of Allah God in the history of the world. See, the history can be studied. And it says, since the grafting of the Caucasian race 6,000 years ago, that's a point of reference in time. 6,000 years ago, they have caused more bloodshed than any people known to the black nation. Because another thing that people like to say is, well, white folks wasn't the only ones engaging in slavery, which to certain degrees is true, to certain degrees on the spectrum. But they are the ones who did it the worst and didn't have any recognition of not being a human. No other people have enslaved another people and took away the very concept of them not being human. Up until that point, it was servitude, one human serving another. When these Caucasians, they got their hands on slavery, they said, oh, these not even humans. They're less than humans. So that's, once you don't recognize another human being as being a human, anything you do, say, choose to believe is justified based off of not even recognizing them as being human beings. So that's what makes it the worst. Nobody's ever done that up until, for the last 6,000 years. They have caused more bloodshed than any people known to the black nation. Born murderers, Their very nature is to murder. It says the Bible and Holy Quran Sharif are full of teachings of this bloody race of devils. They shed the lifeblood of all life, even their own, and are scientists at deceiving the black people. Now, today, like I said, the history can be studied, but so can the present. And only just now do we see people speaking out against publicly on a large scale, people speaking out against Israel and pro Palestine. This has been a struggle per se since the 40s, I believe, since 1940s. And the Israelis aren't the only Caucasians who are oppressing another group of people in that fashion. We still, and see, that's the thing. Most people, this is something I was just thinking about too, is that today, now in 2025, it's okay, socially acceptable to say free Palestine, where a few years ago you would have been quote unquote canceled, when cancel didn't really exist at the time, but you would be publicly demonized for even speaking against Israel. Now people have accepted that it's acceptable to speak against Israel and be pro-Palestine. But there has not been any apology made to the people who were speaking on these things when it wasn't publicly accepted. So even though the world has quote unquote caught up, there has not been anything made right. And I say that to say that the same way that that's happening for pro-Palestinians, and there's been no apology made for the people who spoke up against it, the same thing should be better when the world catches up to the plight of the black man and woman in the hills of North America. When those of us who have been speaking against the devil and their devilishment against original people in the past and the present, particularly those of us who was kidnapped from our homeland and brought over here, it's not socially acceptable in this day and age to speak on those things. But one day the world will accept it. They will have to, and apologies should be made. Now, continuing on, it says, they shed the lifeblood of all life, even their own, and are scientists at deceiving the black people. Now, we can see on social media the straight savagery that these people are having against another human being. We can see it. And now, you know what? That was the genius of Martin Luther King. Now, I don't agree with his approach, turning the other cheek. I think that that concept pushed as an agenda does more harm than it does good, because it doesn't teach a people to adhere or to follow the first law of nature, which is self-preservation. It does more damage. However, from a strategic perspective, the same thing that Martin Luther King, he borrowed from Mahatma Gandhi, which I don't even agree with Mahatma Gandhi either. Matter of fact, I say to hell with Mahatma Gandhi, because he was willing to step on the necks. He was willing to step on the neck of the black man in South America. In South Africa, just to get ahead in the eyes of the British. So to hell with Gandhi, and to hell with the agenda that Martin Luther King had borrowed from Gandhi to push his own agenda, thinking that he was pushing us forward. But all praises are due to Allah in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, when Martin Luther King was able to recognize and wake up to the foolishness that was going on. Now, I say all that to say that the focus or strategy that Martin Luther King had employed was that he believed that if the larger American public was able to see the wickedness and savagery of the Caucasian police force doing the things that they were doing privately without the media knowing. So shooting black people with water hoses, sicking people with dogs, and lynching and doing all these wicked and savage things to another human being privately outside of the media. Martin Luther King believed wholeheartedly that if the public knew what was going on, then they would uprise and revolt against it and say enough is enough. So, with that mental concept in mind, there was some truth to it. But also, history is best qualified to reward our research, and we see that it did more damage. The integration did more damage. Uh, the best thing would have been to separate and then let the destruction and uh, judgment be passed on those people, regardless of our. It takes a real sincere human to have quote unquote compassion for somebody who doesn't have any love for you. It does. It takes spiritual maturity. Like the Bible, Jesus said, forgive them for they know not what they do. Right? That's maturity. But also, maturity is recognizing actually they do know what they're doing. They just don't have it in them to do right. So I say all that to say that if we look at the present, not even studying history, but looking at the present, we can see clearly, without a shadow of a doubt, how wicked and devilish these people who are continuing their wickedness truly are. It comes a point in time where it can't even be denied. So it says here, they deceive the very people of paradise. Bible Genesis 3:13. Now that's the same what we're talking about now of having a certain nature, a certain heart with compassion. That's the type of a person that's required to be considered a person of paradise. But it says here in the Bible, they deceive the very people of paradise. So we now know how they deceived us. They killed their own brother, Genesis 4:8. The innocent earth's blood, Genesis 4:10. You know what? Let's slow it down and let's actually get into, because we don't want to just, oh, that's that Muslim, that's the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He was not even, he don't know about the Bible. He don't know about the Bible. That's just because you don't like white people. It ain't even about that. Let's read it. It says they deceive the very people of paradise. Bible Genesis 3:13. We're going to Genesis. We open up the book in the name of Allah. Genesis 3. My bookmark says, remember the agreement you made with God and yourself. Praises are due to Allah. Some heavy stuff. Okay. It says Genesis 3:13. Then the Lord God said to the woman, what is this that you have done? The woman said, the serpent deceived me and I ate. So the serpent is what deceived the person that was in paradise. It says here, Genesis 4:8, they killed their own brother. Now we know the first one, that's Cain killing Abel. But let's read it. 4:8. Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. That's a wicked person who killed his own brother and rose up again. And this was out of whatever the justification was. This was because God favored Abel more than he favored Cain, not because of who they uh, were willing to give, but it was the intent that they were giving from. And that's a very difficult concept to digest, especially as a father. You, at least for me, you really don't. I know I don't want to favor one child more than the other, because we don't want that favor to cause disunity amongst your brothers. Now, not uh not from any, I say, outside of the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, that I have not been able to verify. My personal belief is that Cain was the child of the serpent. So when Eve was doing what the serpent told her to do, eating from the fruits of the knowledge of good and evil, I think he slid up in her. Excuse my slang. He slid up in her and planted his seed. And his seed, Cain, that was the seed of the serpent. So they had the same mama, different fathers. It says here, they killed their own brother. And now we understand the teachings of Elijah Muhammad teaching us about grafting from the original. So it was a process to bring about a different race of people that was directly opposite from original. And they ended up killing their own. It says the innocent earth's blood, Genesis 4:10. 4:10 says, and the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now Elijah Muhammad is saying here is the innocent earth's blood. It says, but revealed it to its maker, thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. The very earth, the soil of America, soaked with the innocent blood of the so-called Negroes shed by this race of devils, now crieth out to its maker for thy burden of carrying the innocent blood of the righteous slain upon her. Let us take a look at the devil's creation from the teachings of the Holy Quran. So the very earth is speaking out against the wickedness that this devil has done. It says here, let us take a look at the devil's creation from the teachings of the Holy Quran. And when your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place in the earth one who shall rule, the angels said, what wilt thou place in it, such as shall make mischief in it and shed blood? We celebrate thy praise and extol thy holiness. Holy Quran Sharif 230. We can go in and explore that as well. Although the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has already written it there for us to read, we still want to keep our blade sharp and go back to the source so that we can stay in tune. That's the whole concept of being in tune. In the Holy Quran too, Bismillah, in the name of Allah, the cow, (30). It says, and when the Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a ruler in the earth, they said, will thou place in it such as make mischief in it and shed blood? And we celebrate thy praise and extol thy holiness. He says, surely I know what you know not. So basically the angels are saying to this man, the man says, I'm going to place a ruler in the earth. And the angels are saying, wait, why are you going to place somebody to make mischief and shed blood? And we sitting here praising and exalt. We doing righteousness, doing what we're supposed to do, but you're going to place somebody on the earth that's going to do opposite of what we're doing. We were made from the nature of righteousness and the nature of Islam, of peace. And you're going to place somebody on the earth to have rulership, and their nature is not the nature of us. We're taught by the teachings of Honorable Elijah Muhammad that this is Yaqub who's saying, surely I know what you know not. Basically, sit down, be quiet, and do what I say. But we understand why now. We understand why. It says here, this devil's race has and still is doing just that, making mischief and shedding blood. Making mischief and shedding blood. You're talking about today, right now, it's still doing it. The devil race has and still is doing just that, making mischief and shedding blood. And the black nation whom they were grafted from, when your Lord said to the angels, surely I am going to create a mortal of the essence of black mud fashioned into shape. I'm going to read that again. I really want us to embody what's being said here so we actually have full understanding and then full understanding. Excuse me. Give me 1 second. Okay. Honorable Elijah Muhammad is saying, it says, the devil race has and still is doing just that, making mischief and shedding blood. That's right. And the black nation whom they were grafted from, us being original, when your Lord said to the angels, surely I am going to create a mortal of the essence of black mud fashioned into shape. Holy Quran Sharif 15:28. It says the essence of black mud, the black nation mentioned, is only symbolic, which actually means the sperm of the black nation. And they refused to recognize the black nation as their equal, though they were made from and by a black scientist named Yaqub. I'm gonna read that again. It says, and they refused to recognize the black nation as their equal, though they were made from and by a black scientist named Yaqub. Now, not only is it clear that they didn't want us as their equal, but it's clear according to history that they labeled us less than a human being. And my father here is saying we were classified as 3/5 of a human being in writing. That's wicked. It says they can never see their way in submitting to Allah and the religion Islam and his prophets. They can never see their way in submitting to Allah and the religion Islam and his prophets. You may have read in last week's issue of this paper's magazine section of a Southern Devil's letter, whose name this paper withheld, making fun of you and especially our women, whom he classified as nothing, getting children from different men, which we know is the truth. He and his fathers are responsible for making their slaves such as they are. But the foolish slave should now awaken and fly with his family from his slave masters and protect his woman from making love with his enemies, even to his death. Now, a thought just came to mind. I hear what you are thinking when you say, well, we in 2025 now. Why are you still bringing up all this stuff that happened in the past? And, when we were growing up and we would go and rip and run and go play sports and just, man, be all sweaty and stank and nasty. And at that time when we were growing up, middle school and high school, there was this company. It was called Axe. They had body spray. They came out with body spray. And I just remember that in school, people would be stank and dirty and they would just spray themselves with Axe body spray to cover the smell. And now when I think about that and look back how nasty that actually is, you basically, and that's something that Europeans used to do. The Europeans, that's what perfume, it wasn't to necessarily smell good and clean. It was to cover over the body odor, the stench, the stank. And that's disgusting. So that same thing here, when people are trying to just brush over the past, trying to spray perfume to make it seem like it's clean. when it's not. It needs to be scrubbed down and removed. You got to get into the shower, scrub down and soap, put some real cleaning on it. And that's the same thing here. Is it's going to cause some death and separation in order to remove this wickedness from the planet. It's not something that can just be sprayed over and perfumed and brushed over and think that there's, we're just going to forgive and forget. That's not how this thing works. It says here, this name, Southern Devil, criticized this paper for its news and pointed out Mr. Jones and myself as trash. That this paper should get rid of us along with its love potion. As for the love potion, the so-called Negro press would make a wise step towards better respect if they would leave out their papers and magazines this filthy love mess, which is ruining their younger generation to the extent that when our children get their hands on the papers or magazines, they go first for such reading and pictures. To rid the paper of myself, to rid the paper of myself or article is the real thing that the devil desires out. Why? Because I am telling you the truth. The old bloodthirsty devil, I fear you won't get your desire of getting rid of Elijah Muhammad, not if it isn't the will of my God Allah, who is ever with me to slay you for slaying his messengers of old and the so-called Negroes. That really causes me to go back to this verse here as I'm continuing my studies. And we go into Revelations where the whole thing kicked off on 16:6. And we say, giving praise and glory to Master Farad Muhammad, who brought these judgments to us, because they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. This is what they deserve. This is what history is saying. This is what they deserve. And if you who are here saying, no, that's not that, it can't be them. It's not the once slave master. It's not the colonizer. It's not them. It's somebody else. Then show us who it is. Show and prove who it is that these verses are talking about. Because we have not had the position as black people, as original people, have not had the position within the last 6,000 years to do these things. We did not kidnap a group of human beings. You can go into the Bible and find the worst possible things that any human being could ever do and think of doing to another human being. Find it. This is the beauty of teaching Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He used to say in an article, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, you have so much love and compassion, and you grieve so much for Jesus because he was being crucified. They hung him up, nailed him to the cross. But you don't have that same compassion for your brother, who is the same thing is happening to him. He's being strung up, and that happened 2,000 years ago. They crucified Jesus 2,000 years ago, and you still grieving today. But your brother and sister and mother and father and family member, our family members, were hung up on the trees less than 2,000 years ago, and we forgive and forget immediately. We rush to the press and forgive. Oh, we just praying. We pray that he's okay. Why we don't have that same outlook when it comes to Jesus? We want to revenge Jesus. Jesus said, no, forgive them for they know not what they do, but we ready to fight. But when it comes to our own family, what do we say? Oh, no, just forgive and forget. And which doesn't make any sense, because we say forgive and forget, right? But then we pray to a Jesus who's supposed to return and kill everybody and kill the unrighteous. What? This makes no sense. It's not logical. Even Jesus, who's saying forgive and forget, said, I'm coming back and I'm chopping heads off. There's something ain't right. Something been tampered with. And your very Bible says they deserved it. You have given them blood to drink. That sounds like somebody's head is missing. That's what they deserve. It says here, I fear you won't get your desire of getting rid of Elijah Muhammad, not if it isn't the will of my God Allah, who is ever with me to slay you for slaying his messengers of old and the so-called Negroes. Right, that's what it says. It's the same thing the Bible say. for they have shed the blood of saints and prophets. Where are they at? Okay. Now it says here, uh, may the day, maybe the day has arrived that Allah will return to you, devils, that which you have been so anxious to pour on the poor innocent so-called Negroes, as you love to shed your poor innocent blood of your Negro slaves and plan to kill me for teaching them the truth that they may have friendship with their God and people. Allah will give you your own blood to drink like water, and your arms and allies won't help you against him. Revelation 16:6. You know, this small little paragraph here speaks volumes to us, to our nature. And this is why I believe that us as original people, we really gravitate towards the teachings of Jesus. Because when he says things out of spiritual maturity, like turn the other cheek, it really speaks to our meek and humble nature. Because we really don't want destruction on people who have destroyed us. And it's a sickness, but it's also a health at the same time. It's a dichotomy. But what I'm saying here is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is teaching. He says, maybe the day has arrived that Allah will return to you, devils, that which you have been so anxious to pour on the poor innocent so-called Negroes, as you love to shed the poor innocent blood of your Negro slaves, and plan to kill me for teaching them the truth that they may have friendship with their God and people. Now he's saying a lot here because it's not for the everyday black man and woman to bring hell on these devils. It's not our job as the everyday black man and woman. It's our job to separate, to leave them to their own devices, and let Allah chastise these devils for what they have done. So it doesn't tamper our nature, because it really takes an evil, devilish person to do evil, devilish things on an evil, devilish person. The cycle continues. So we separate and let Allah cut their head off. Now, not only is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad saying that, but he's also saying that the truth that he's teaching is only to bring us friendship with our own, to accept our own and bring and be ourselves. It has no speaking on killing anybody. And that's what the devil is really afraid of, because if we started speaking and trying to go get guns and have an armed revolution, then that would be easy for them. They say, oh, yep, because they got guns. They know how to deal with warfare in that nature. They don't know how to deal with a spiritually mature people who utilize warfare in a different nature. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't have the capacity or the brain power to deal with it on that level. So they want to keep us focused on our lower desires, on our lower nature, fear. They want to keep us fearful of the future. They want to keep us enslaved, worrying about paying the bills. They don't want us to have access to the higher levels of thinking and forget about trying to have a revolution at the end of the gun, because we don't manufacture weapons. So it makes no sense for us to try to fight them with the gun, because they have the leverage in that area. It's not intelligent warfare. Intelligent warfare is how the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches. So it says here, Allah will give you your own blood to drink like water, and your arms and allies won't help you against him. How you gonna shoot at a hurricane and a tsunami? You gonna shoot at an earthquake? The heads and bodies of the so-called Negroes are used to test the clubs and guns of the devils, and yet the poor, foolish so-called Negroes admire the devils regardless of how they are treated. America is now under divine plagues. One will come after the other until she is destroyed. Allah has said it. Join onto us at once. Praise due to Allah. So that concludes that article. We're moving right along. It's a very deep teaching, but it's also so simple. In the Bible here, if we have any type of disagreement or to any type of misunderstanding, it says it very clear. It is what they deserve. And that's the truth. And this is after the preachers be talking about how Jesus said, forgive them for they know not what they do. Well, why they don't have us to keep reading? Because at some point in time, they know what they're doing and they don't deserve forgiveness. It says here, you have given them blood to drink. It is what they deserve. the true and living God. Yes, Lord God the Almighty, true and just are your judgments. All praises are due to Allah. All right. So now, what we are going to do is we are going to open up for questions, comments, concerns. I realize that these messages only get into people who actually want to hear it, because Instagram is not going to share these things. So if you are here thus far, I want to say congratulations. Your attention span is much longer than the average human being. And that really says a lot in these days and time. It's simple things like that that are made to separate how the Bible says, the sheep from the goats, or the uh, 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 wheat from the tare. Simple things that can be compounded over time that really does the separation. And they start to increase over time, and we can go in those things at a later date. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. But now is when we're going to open it up for questions, comments, concerns, discussions. Give me 1 second. It's water. Okay. So now we open it up for the questions. We've been moving right along in these. This is an artifact right here. Appreciate my father for sharing this right here. It's an artifact. It says here 100 answers to the most uncommon 100 questions. It's straight artifact right here. Okay. I'll read these comments and then we'll get into these questions. Comments says from Pops, you were named Fatan Allah Mwangi Bey. That's correct. It says we were classified 3/5 in their constitution. We were classified as 3/5 human beings in their constitution. Correct. What's even worse is the way that they justified and the purpose of justification. When we were in chattel slavery, we were less than human, not even 3/5. We were savage and beasts in their eyes, who was just made. We were not even made as being humans. We were made for servitude. It wasn't until they realized that the votes of individuals mattered, and so people who owned more slaves wanted their votes and their property to speak towards the value of their vote. And so they said, well, each slave should be counted as one full vote. And so these devils started arguing back and forth about the value of a slave in terms of their existence. And so some devils were saying, no, they're useless, worth nothing. And some of them were saying, well, let's give them a full vote. Let's give them a vote, one vote, one man. This is the same deception that they're telling us today. One vote, one man. That's not even true today. But at that time that they labeled us 3/5 of a human, gave each individual slave 3/5 of a value towards a vote. So that these devils who own slaves, now the more slaves that they owned had more leverage and power in their political game. Which is not any less or more wicked. It's just straight devilishment. But it's the history is important, because had it not have been the same reason that the quote unquote Emancipation Proclamation, the same reasoning behind that, it wasn't out of any goodwill towards a human being. It was because one group didn't want the other group. This is the Bible talking about the brother killing the brother. They was fighting because they didn't want one group to have more power than the other. One group, their whole economy was based off of slavery, and the other group was becoming more industrialized. And so one group didn't want the other group to become more powerful. They say, you know what? We're leaning on industry. They're still dependent on slaves. I'm pausing because Instagram is kicking me out. Um, at least that's what it's saying. It's pausing. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Instagram was kicking me out. Anyway, so that's the whole reason behind, right? Praise due to Allah. So that's the whole reason of behind the 3/5 of a human being. Because prior to the voting power, they didn't even have us any percentage of a human being. That's why it's called chattel slavery, because we were commodities. You don't look at and this is the part of consumerism and capitalism that I don't agree with. I don't agree with this concept. I think we need to be more holistic approach. But you look at chickens who are laying eggs, you don't think of them as being live animals, really. They're made to serve for whatever purpose. You don't think about when we eat chicken that it used to be alive. So the same thing that these devils were looking at black people, they didn't look us as being human beings at all. It was chattel slavery. We were property to be used and abused and bred. So wasn't even a simple percentage. It was less than a percentage. They valued dogs more than they valued the slave. It wasn't until they started having a more democratic viewpoint and they wanted to have more voting leverage backed by their industry. So, I mean, there's so much history involved, but you can say like businessmen were wanting to have more influence in their social settings. And because the more slaves you had meant the more property, the more money, it didn't necessarily give you more political power. Just because you made more money as a businessman didn't necessarily mean you had more political influence at that time. It was two separate entities. Just like they separated church and state in their devilish, wicked society, it didn't necessarily translate. Money didn't necessarily translate to political power. So what these businessmen wanted, that they wanted the fact that they had more commodities, more industry, more economy, more slaves. They wanted that to translate to having political power and political influence, so that these uh, politicians would have to go to the businessmen if they wanted to get more votes. So it didn't before they started to say that the slave was worth 3/5 of a human. It didn't matter if man had 10 slaves, 100 slaves. His vote was the same. Didn't matter. But these same businessmen who had wicked intentions to say, you know what? I got all these slaves. I should be more. My vote should count more than his. I got more slaves than he got. So then that's when they started to say, well, how about this? One slave equals one vote. Because this is the thing. It wasn't just voting. If the slave was owned by if the slave was owned by the slave master Caucasian. So anything that the slave did, the Caucasian man had ownership over it. So this goes into the patents, the inventions. You know how many things were invented by black people that white people take credit for, that took credit for? Somebody made an excellent point. They said, why would it make sense for a slave master to make anything easy on us? You know, a lot of these inventions that were created were to make the work easier for the slave. Why would a slave master do anything to make the work easier for the slave? They wouldn't. So what happens is these slaves will invent things to make their workflow easier. Then the slave master would see and say, "Oh wow, that was smart." Took it, patented it, and then sold it as his own. It's wickedness. So that same concept, if you think about it, goes on every. This is why we know that this is a wicked devil. So you see how they did that with inventions. Same thing. Oh well, I got all these slaves. They're not. This is what they're thinking. These slaves are not intelligent enough to know to pick the right politician, but they're still worth a certain percentage in the political. So anyway, summarizing it, the more slaves that they had, they would divide it by 3/5. So each slave was valued 3/5. So then two, you multiply 3/5 by two, and then you just say, you got 100 slaves, multiply that by 3/5. Let's get mathematical. That's what 300, no, 30, 35, 100 multiplied by 3/5. 60. 1 times 3/5 is 60. So you got 100, 3/5 out of 100, 60. Okay. So if these people had 100 slaves, they would multiply by 3/5 and you get 60 votes. Now, of course, they're not saying, oh, the slave master's not going to each uh slave and saying, oh, how do you vote? How do you vote? No, he would say, okay, I calculated 3/5, throw that into the pot. Now we got 61 votes in one way. That's an excellent point as well because of the census. They needed to know how to tax per slave. It's all wickedness. And I don't even want to keep going into the history so much to want to understand it to that degree, but just to show how wicked this and how deep rooted these things are. So it's not no amounts of Axe body spray is going to get rid of this stench. It needs to be completely removed. It says here, now we're going to go into 100 answers to the most 100 uncommon questions. Where did the lower forms of animal life come from and how it came about? That's an interesting question. This is the form of the messenger speaking. The form of animal life, I asked him about it, him being Master Farad. And how did they come here? The first thing he answered is since we had the earth, we had the animals on it. I said, how was they made? He said, I told you, ever since we had the earth, we had animals right on it. I would like to know the authenticity of the lost 10 books of the Bible. And the messenger saying, I don't know, brother. He didn't teach me that any books were lost. Question mark. The question says, according to the Bible, it teaches that God is a spirit, and that was the main thing that kind of stumbled me when I first heard your teaching. Are these quotes in the Bible been added, and how long have this teaching been going on? Ever since the writers of the book. Question is, I would like to know if the Nation of Islam teaches of a heaven and hell as in Christianity. The messenger says, no, not like Christianity, but it teaches of a heaven and hell, but not in the same way that Christianity teaches. We teach of a heaven and a hell while you live. You cannot be tormented in hell if you are not alive. You got to be excuse me. I had to get it out. Just one. It says, you got to be alive to feel the torment. And if you are in a heaven, you got to be alive to feel the joys of heaven. That's how so simple and deep that is at the same time. Then, sir, there is no such thing as life after death. Messenger says, no. If you are referring to a physical death, a physical, excuse me, a physical death does not carry any life. It's physically dead. But if you are referring to a spiritual death, that is true. Being dead to the Spirit of God. You don't have His Spirit in you, then we call you dead. That's interesting. All right. That'll conclude. It's a lot of information we're getting into. That concludes the question and answer portion of our Sun Studies today. So, what I'll do before we get out of here, I'm gonna ask if we have any more comments, questions, concerns after what we have written. I mean, excuse me, what we have read, what we gone into the questions, any topics or discussions. Um, and thank you. If you have not already done so, please hit that like button. Thank you for those on Instagram who are uh, uh, clicking the hearts. I can see that. If you're here on YouTube, go ahead and click that like button. It prevents the Instagram algorithms from trying to kick me out like they normally do. Uh, peace, Prince Saladin. I'm like him. Welcome in. We just now getting the conclusion. We just went into our sun studies, studying Revelations. Um, and also, feel free to give any feedback. Um, those of you who have been tuning in, um, don't be a stranger. Let me know your thoughts, how I can assist in getting more in depth into the sun studies. I think part of it really does a disservice when I don't have uh, people who are not familiar with these teachings, who are not giving feedback, asking questions. That's why I'm so appreciative of my wife, because she's never been exposed to these teachings. So she asks questions for clarity, and it really challenges not necessarily my belief, but my knowledge of these teachings. And it makes me really delve in a lot more deeply. And the disservice, because I've already been uh, exposed to these teachings, so to speak, it doesn't um, have that same shock value as it would to somebody who's never heard these things before. So sometimes I might read and gloss over something unknowingly, that same verse may hit someone a little differently. So feel free to share those thoughts and comments, and we can, grow and rise together. So I thank you for joining me thus far. Congratulations for making it this far. And never forget, according to the words of Master Farah Muhammad, Allah in the person, you are the best, the righteous, and the powerful. And so I leave you as I came, in the universal understanding of peace of Assalamu alaikum.